Hello, friends, and welcome back to Compelling Stories for a Dinner Party. I'm your host, Christopher James, and tonight we'll discuss one of the most famous unsolved murder mysteries in Germany. It's the 100-year-old mystery of the Hinterkaifeck murders. Who killed the Gruber family? So settle in, pop the cork, and pass the cheese plate. Let's get into it. In the heart of Bavaria, nestled amidst rolling hills and whispering forests, lay the isolated farmstead of Hinterkaifeck, a place shrouded in mystery and cloaked in an eerie silence. It was the setting for one of the most chilling unsolved crimes in German history. Our story unfolds on the cusp of spring in 1922, when the tranquil life of the farm's inhabitants was brutally extinguished by an unknown assailant. The Gruber family, known throughout their rural community, carried an air of mystery about them. Andreas Gruber, the family head, was known for his stoic nature and aggressive behavior towards others. His wife, Gazilja, was recognized for her resilience, bearing the visage of a life filled with toil and endurance. Their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, navigated widowhood with grace, despite the murmurs of shame and scandal that sometimes shadowed her footsteps. The youthful spirits of her children, Gazilja and Joseph, brought a spark of joy to the homestead, their innocence untouched by the complex world around them. Into this intricate family dynamic stepped Maria Baumgartner, the new maid, full of optimism yet oblivious to the dark turn her path would soon take. As the harsh embrace of winter began to wane, the residents of the secluded Hinterkaifeck farm felt the icy tendrils of apprehension tighten around them. Andreas Gruber, the stoic patriarch, found himself unable to shake a growing sense of foreboding. In the beginning, it was an innocuous piece of paper, a newspaper from Munich, an object so mundane yet so utterly out of place in their rustic existence that it seemed to have materialized from another world. Then came the footprints, a silent procession of marks in the snow leading from the foreboding expanse of the forest to the very threshold of their home. They appeared without witness, leading nowhere, as if the bearer vanished into the ether. Most unsettling were the sounds that began to emanate from the attic, a space shrouded in dust and memories, now the stage for an unseen presence. The creak of weight on old wood, the whisper of movement in a stagnant air, these were the signs that sowed a creeping dread into the hearts of the Gruber family, a prelude to the nightmare that awaited. As the calendar marked the arrival of March 31st, 1922, an ominous pall settled over Hinterkaifeck. The day progressed like any other, with the rhythmic toil of farm life playing its timeless melody. Yet, as dusk approached, the air grew heavy with an unspoken dread. The Gruber family, alongside their new maid Maria Baumgartner, found themselves ensnared in a meticulously woven trap, their fates sealed by an unseen architect of death. The barn, once a center of farm life, was turned into a grim setting for a series of brutal killings. The victims were somehow led to the barn one by one, only to meet their end at the hands of an unseen attacker. The mattock, typically used for farm work, became a weapon, efficiently used to commit a horrifying act of violence. The horror didn't stop at the barn, it continued inside the house, where Joseph and Maria Baumgartner were killed in their sleep, unaware of the terror that had entered their home. Their deaths marked the final chapter of this tragic event, leaving a lasting impact on the community and history. After the killings, a heavy silence fell over Hinterkaifeck, as if everything had paused. Despite this, signs of normal life continued under the killer's control. For 3 days, the murderer stayed, taking care of the farm animals, cooking meals, and keeping the fire going, all while surrounded by the murder victims. This eerie period, where routine farm life went on next to the aftermath of such violence, highlighted the killer's disturbed state of mind. The reasons behind these actions stayed unknown, making this phase of the story even more unsettling. In the soft light of dawn on April 4th, 1922, a silence hung over Hinterkaifeck, a silence so profound it seemed as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The catalyst for the grim discovery was mundane, a routine visit by coffee sellers Hans Scharovsky and Edward Scharovsky, their arrival marked by the cheerful rattle of their cart, a stark contrast to the ominous quiet of the farm. Their calls, once greeted with warmth, now echoed unanswered, their knocks dissipating into the chilling silence. A cursory exploration revealed nothing but the open gate of the machine house, an unspoken invitation to a scene of horror they were spared from witnessing. As the sun arced higher, casting light on the unspeakable, it was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, driven by a blend of concern and an inexplicable intuition, who led the fateful expedition to Hinterkaifeck. Accompanied by Michael Pohl and Jacob Sigel, their steps were heavy with the weight of impending doom as they breached the perimeter of the farm. The barn, a structure that once stood as a testament to the fruits of hard labor, now held within its walls a tableau of horror that would sear itself into the chronicles of history. The investigation that ensued, led by Inspector George Reingruber, was a journey into the abyss and was marred by complications and setbacks from the outset, leading to a series of dead ends and unresolved questions that haunt the case to this day. In the immediate aftermath of the discovery, the crime scene was compromised. Before police arrived, several community members had entered the barn and the house, disturbing the scene and potentially contaminating evidence. This initial mishandling set a precedent for the challenge that would plague the investigation. Early efforts by the police were hindered by the lack of advanced forensic techniques available at the time. Basic investigative methods were employed, but the absence of tools like fingerprinting or DNA analysis meant that physical evidence could not be conclusively linked to a suspect. So what do we know about the killer? Well, if we peel back the layers of the Hinterkaifeck murders, we are drawn into a shadowy world where secrets and motives intertwine with the macabre, and a list of suspects emerges from the mist, each carrying the weight of suspicion. First, we encounter Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, presumed to have fallen on the battlefields of France during World War I. Yet whispers in a village spoke of a man who defied death, his body having never been found. Could a man believed to be swallowed by the chaos of conflict return seeking revenge? It was well known in the village and established in court that Andreas Gruber had been having incestuous relations with his daughter, Victoria. Andreas was convicted of incest and spent a year in prison because of it. It was widely believed that Victoria's youngest son, Joseph, was the product of her father's rape. Was it possible that her husband, Carl Gabriel, found out about the incest and killed the family in a blind rage? The absence of Carl Gabriel's physical remains fueled speculation of that theory, but proof of the specter of Carl Gabriel wandering the Russian front or the Bavarian countryside remains an enigma as elusive as his fate. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor ensnared in a web of intimacy and dispute with Victoria, strides into the heart of suspicion. Victoria claimed that her youngest child, Joseph, was fathered by Lorenz, but Lorenz also knew about the incestuous rape of Victoria, and as such would not at first claim Joseph as his own. It is believed the claim of paternity caused conflict in the Gruber household, specifically between Andreas and Victoria, as recently as 2 days before the murders. The actions of Lorenz in the aftermath of the murders were considered by some as peculiar and unsettling. They paint a portrait of a man intimately entwined with the victims. The ease with which he navigated the crime scene, producing his own personal key to the house, his familiarity with the farmstead, and some unsettling remarks made a year after the murders, all hint at a knowledge that surpassed that of a mere acquaintance. Was it the heartache of a spurned lover, the desperation of a father, or the cold calculation of a murderer that drove his actions on that fateful day? Lorenz was considered by many to be the definitive killer of the Gruber family. He was never arrested, and years later in life he successfully sued several people for referring to him as the Hinterkaifeck killer. Amidst the turmoil of post-war Germany, the Gump brothers, Adolf and Anton, emerge as figures cloaked in the dark vestiges of political unrest. Their association with the Freikorps, a paramilitary group marred by violence, casts a long shadow. Add in the deathbed confession of their sister, Crescentia Mayer, implicating the brothers in the bloodshed, and it weaves a thread of guilt and familial betrayal that seems plausible. It is clear that Crescentia has told this story at least 3 other times in her life, twice to different priests and once at her father's funeral. Yet the shroud of time and the absence of concrete evidence render her motives speculative. Several others of the 15 Gump siblings came forward to dispute their sister's claim, confirming Crescentia had always hated her brothers Adolf and Anton specifically, but held disdain for most of her siblings. The deathbed confession may have been an angry sister's final attempt to cause grief. The Bichler brothers, Anton and Karl, alongside George Siegel, are painted against the backdrop of familiarity and contempt. Their labor on the farm granted them first-hand knowledge of the property. The former family maid, Crescence Reiger, reported that Anton had previously said he thought the family should be dead. The context of the statement suggests the laborers also know of the family's secrets. Their knowledge of the family's secrets and their whispered threats against the Gruber family weave a tapestry of suspicion tightly around them. Yet the absence of definitive proof, the echoes of hearsay, and the passage of time blur the lines between fact and folklore. One chilling theory posits that the patriarch of the Gruber family, Andreas Gruber, was not a victim, but the orchestrator of the horrifying events at Hinterkaifeck. According to this view, the seemingly inexplicable behavior of the killer, remaining at the farm for days, maintaining daily chores, could be explained by Andreas himself committing the murders and having nowhere else to go. The theory suggests that on that fateful night, Andreas, driven to the brink by perceived betrayal and rage, brutally murdered his own family members. This theory paints a picture of a man unraveling upon discovering the true paternity of his grandson, Joseph, a secret supposedly kept by his daughter Victoria. Enraged by the deceit and emboldened by his violent tendencies, Andreas may have lashed out in a fatal confrontation that ended in bloodshed. In this narrative, after Victoria and her parents argued, possibly over the child's paternity, she fled into the forest, fearing her father's wrath. When Andreas learned that he was not Joseph's father, his fury allegedly unleashed a spree of violence. He is said to have beaten and strangled Victoria before turning the mattock on other intervening family members. During this rage, he may have attempted to assault his granddaughter, Kazelia, leading to further intervention by other family members. The next day, while attempting to bury the bodies and finding the ground too frozen, Andreas purportedly continued his chores on the farm, avoiding detection by staying out of sight when visitors arrived. After hiding the murder weapon in the attic, his own demise came when Lorenz Schlittenbauer, driven by a mixture of concern and suspicion, confronted him in the barn. In a tragic twist, Andreas was fatally injured during this confrontation. Schlittenbauer, who later entered the house using a key he had taken from Andreas, found his young son among the victims, sealing his resolve to cover up the incident. Haunted by the events, he reportedly maintained his silence, divulging only cryptic hints about his deeper knowledge of that night's events. This theory, while speculative, delves deep into the psychological and emotional turmoil within the Gruber household, offering a dark and twisted possibility that Andreas Gruber could have been capable of such heinous acts. As the years passed, the investigation saw numerous suspects interrogated, from transient laborers to neighbors with potential motives. Despite these efforts, no conclusive evidence was ever found to definitively identify the perpetrator. Theories abounded from family disputes to robbery motives, but none could be proven beyond doubt. Who do you think murdered the Gruber family? Be sure to leave us a comment below and tell us your theory about the killer. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button for the newest stories and that like button to tell us how we're doing. Well, my friends, we have come to the end of another fabulous dinner party. We hope you enjoyed this story tonight, and we hope to see you at the table again next time. Until then, my friends, may your gatherings always be eclectic and your stories compelling. Good night.